Coming up today on The Story.
I remember my son saying to me one day when both of them came home also, Eric, without a word of English, and it wasn't long after our son got home and, he said to me, "What took you so long to get me?" This is in translation. "What took you so long to come and get me?" And I said, we had to wait 6 years. It was so hard for us. And I started talking about what a long, hard journey. And he just looked at me and he said, "You think that 6 years was long for you?" He said, "Imagine what it was like for me."
The Story.
G'day, I'm Jimmy Colefax. Welcome to The Story. Well, recently on the program, Eric Scatterbo spoke with Chloe Hayden and her mother Sarah from Geelong. Chloe is an advocate for young people diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, and is a guest speaker at many schools and events across Australia. Her mother Sarah is a social worker specialising in autism. Today, we've invited Sarah back to tell us about two of her other children, specifically the two children that she and her husband adopted from Taiwan. She'll share their adoption journey and some of the joys and challenges they've faced. She's having a chat with Eric Scatterbo.
Sarah Hayden, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Eric. It's great to be back.
Glad to have you with us once again. And before we start to chat about your adoption journey, can you give us an update on how Chloe's doing?
I certainly can. So since Chloe spoke to you last, she has represented Australia in the Worlds for Extreme Cowboys, which is the horse riding that she does. She went to Texas by herself for a couple of months, which was a huge step for her and for us as a family. And she did Australia proud. She did a fantastic job over there. And since coming back, she's been doing a lot of work in film and television, which is a real passion of hers.
Yeah, and getting some international press coverage, I understand.
Absolutely, she has. She's just had an interview with Teen Vogue USA this weekend.
Wow.
She has had recent newspaper articles in The Guardian UK. She's got a massive following on TikTok, which often gets into the millions of views.
Wow.
And, really using her voice, and has got a great platform for being able to advocate for the things that she's passionate about, which is, mainly autism awareness. So doing a fantastic job there. We're super, super proud.
Yeah, and meanwhile, she is involved in the praise and worship at her church. Is that right?
She absolutely is, yes. I think probably the proudest mum moment for me. It doesn't matter how many millions of people she gets watching her or liking her YouTube and TikToks that she does. I think for me, my proudest moment is on a Sunday when we actually see her worshipping in church for our God, because that just trumps everything for us. And she's a passionate worshipper. It's something that she just adores doing. Just standing on stage and just giving all for the glory of God is just our favourite part of the week. It's amazing.
Wow, that's fantastic. So Chloe's going from strength to strength, and you have two other biological children?
I do, absolutely. We've got 5 children altogether. We've got 3 biological kids, which are 23, 19 and 16. And then we've got our 2 littlies who were both adopted from Taiwan, who are now 12 and 9. So age gap of sort of from 23 to 9 across 5 kids.
Okay, and your adopted children is what we want to focus on today. Tell us, how did this whole adoption journey start?
Great question, Eric. I think my adoption journey started when I was a very young child. For some reason, I always say I was born wanting to adopt. I'm not quite sure where it came from, and my parents never knew where it came from. It was something that I just had placed on my heart, and I think now I realised it was obviously something that God placed in my heart from a very young age, because from a young child, I would tell my parents all the time that one day I was going to adopt a baby from overseas. And I can still remember when my mother would buy me baby dolls, I would always ask for the coloured doll and say that it was my adopted baby. And it's funny because I was just adamant from a very young age that would be part of how I'd form my family. I always also wanted biological kids, but I just had it in my heart since I was very young that I would one day be adopting from overseas. And it was a real yearning, and it was something that I wasn't prepared to give up on. And when I married my wonderful, long-suffering husband, Ronnie, 23 years ago, I sort of said to him at those early stages, he'd not long come over from Ireland and was from a very large Irish Catholic family and was hopeful that we would have many, many children. And I explained to him that we would be having some biological children, and then we would start adopting. And it took him quite a few years, Eric, to get on board with that.
Yeah, I was wondering, what was his reaction?
Yeah, so his reaction was a little bit more, we can have a dozen children biologically of our own. He sort of always envisioned a very big Irish Catholic family, I think. So To be honest, it was something that we struggled with for a few years because he just wasn't on board. It was something that, I knew in my heart of hearts, and I was adamant that would be the way that my family would be formed, and it was something that I wasn't able to negotiate on or let up on. And for the first few years of our marriage, we had our first 3 children, and he was quite happy. He loves kids, loves being a dad, loves our family, was quite happy for us to keep going. But I was adamant then that we'd had our 3 biological kids, and now I was ready to begin our adoption journey. And I guess it's something that he used to get quite upset with me about because I would hound him regularly. I'd pass him all of the paperwork to help me fill out. I'd be getting him to read and watch and listen to everything I could in an attempt to persuade him. And I remember clearly one day he said to me, "You can't persuade me to adopt children. If I don't feel like I can't, then you don't ever want to persuade somebody to adopt if they're not willing or ready, because it's not fair to the kids and it's not fair to the family. And, you need to stop talking about it." And it was a real, I guess, faith moment for me where I had to respect and obey my husband's wishes. And I did understand, and I had a real sense that, he's right. You can't, it's not persuading somebody to go and adopt a kitten that they're not going to like. I mean, these are children. And, if he's adamant that he can't, I found myself sort of questioning, well, why have I always wanted to do this? And the yearning for me never went away. And it was actually our 10th wedding anniversary. I can remember it like yesterday, and he usually spoilt me rotten and bought lots of presents every wedding anniversary, which is Valentine's Day as well. We got married on.
Oh, okay.
And he gave me a card for our 10th wedding anniversary, and there was nothing in it except for the words that he was ready to adopt. And we hadn't spoken about it for a couple of years at that time. I'd stopped nagging him, and he had very strongly felt that, yes, this is what we're going to do, and I'm ready to do it. And it was nothing to do with me begging or persuading or, coaxing him. He just made that decision. And again, I think only God can change somebody's heart that strongly to go from being so adamant. So that day, on our 10th wedding anniversary, we began the process of adoption. At that stage in Australia, I had no idea really about what we were to be expecting. Inter-country adoption in Australia is certainly not something very common. There is very few adoptions in Victoria each year through inter-country adoption. We didn't personally know anyone that had adopted through inter-country, and we were not prepared at all for the process or how long it was going to take, despite the fact I'd had my heart set on it forever.
So that was the beginning of starting the process. Can we just go back a moment? And I'm wondering, you had this yearning in your heart since you were a little girl. Do you think it was, at the heart of it, was wanting to help somebody less fortunate? Was that part of it?
Absolutely. So for me, obviously I was blessed. Unlike a lot of people who turn to adoption, I was able to have biological children, which, I'm very thankful for.
Yeah.
As you said earlier, I'm a social worker. Before I studied social work, I'd studied nursing and midwifery. I think I was born, obviously, to serve and help other people, and I have a real yearning and a real passion to, for social justice and to help those that are less fortunate. And I think for me, yes, I've always wanted a big family. I adore kids. I love having lots of people around me, and I love big families, but I also strongly felt such a sense of injustice that there were children in the world that didn't have forever families, and those children deserve to have a forever family. And, while I also feel strongly that inter-country adoption is very much a last resort, I think, all children should be able to stay in the country of their birth if that's something that's appropriate for that child. That's obviously the very first choice is to stay with their biological family. The second choice is to stay with their country of birth, and obviously the third and final is to seek a family that's outside of that country. And, for me, I just felt really strongly that there was so many children in overseas orphanages that were just desperate for, forever families, that all avenues had been exhausted within the country to adopt them out or place them out, and that wasn't possible. And so, I was happy to be that last resort. And so for us, it was not so much about forming a family as providing a family for children who needed it. So that was, I think, my motivation for adopting. And certainly when Ronnie had come around to it in the end, he really understood. And it's funny, it took him 10 years to come around, but when he came around, his heart for adoption was as big and strong as what mine was. And we, were able to really push through it together, which is what you have to do, because the process is just unbelievable.
You're listening to The Story. Today, Eric Scatterbo is chatting with Sarah Hayden from Geelong, who's sharing with us her and her husband Ronnie's adoption journey. And as she just mentioned, it was a difficult process, taking 6 years of filling out forms and having psychiatric evaluations, not to mention the costs involved. But ultimately, they were successful and able to adopt 2 children from Taiwan. We'll find out how it all came about when we return.
The Story.